Well, I think Samir and I have just agreed that we're going to bypass most of our introductions and just use that as our time. I'm an attorney here in town. I was born in Daytona Beach. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of speaking to this group a number of times. And I do speak to a number of groups, from law students to pastors to what have you. And this is, without fail, the sharpest group that I speak with in terms of the aggressiveness of your intellect. And so I always appreciate the robust debate that we have and discussion when I come here. We are here to talk about the separation of church and state and the proper role of faith in public life. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to, if I could get a 6-minute warning, Joseph, that would be great, because we have 12 minutes to talk, and I have about 12 hours of material, so I'm going to have to talk very fast. I'd like to address primarily two things that we normally hear often in public discourse and debate. The first thing that we hear is this notion that you should not or you cannot legislate morality. The second is that there is this wall of separation between church and state. So let's look at both of those arguments. The first argument, that you cannot legislate morality, I think you have to start with a definition of what is morality. What do we mean by morality when we say that? And I think that there's really two words that we can look at critically. The first word is ethics. Okay? Ethics. Some people mean ethics when they say you can't legislate morality. And ethics is actually a word that comes from the Greek, which is ethos. It's the same word that we use for a stall. A stall meaning where a horse would return over and over again. It speaks of a place of permanence. It speaks of a place of not changing. It speaks of a reliability. So ethics is the imperative. It is the normal. It is the standard. So ethics, if you will, speaks of oughtness. What ought our behavior to be? What ought the law to be? That's ethics. Morality, on the other hand, comes from the Latin word mores, which is a descriptive term. It's not imperative. It's indicative. It's an indicator. It's asking what is the behavior of the people, not what ought the behavior of the people to be. And so with morality, we see a description. It basically says, and the morality of the people today are different than the morality of the people in the 1950s. And so morality concerns itself with isness, while ethics concerns itself with oughtness. So with this background and formal definitions, let's apply them to the context if you can't legislate morality. Some people mean this, that you cannot really impose personally held religious views of truth and morality should not be imposed upon the rest of society by the use of the force of law and public policy. Okay, that's what they mean by that. So using that term, really, morality in the term, really the meaning of ethics, that you should not impose your personal, private view of morality upon the rest of society. Well, the problem with that argument is very simple. Every law, every code, every ordinance, every statute, every piece of legislation is an imposition of some person's morality upon the rest of society. The real question is not, are we going to legislate morality? The question is, whose morality are we going to legislate? And here we get to the representative democratic process that operates within a constitutional republic, where we answer that question through the process that we've been given. So, I mean, stop signs, even when the law says, hey, we want you to stop here, right? That is somebody imposing their view of the value of order and safety and the sanctity of human life upon the rest of society. So even the most innocuous codes do this. Now, the second way this phrase is understood is with the strict use of the term morality. And that is that what they really mean to say is that you can't legislate morality because irrespective of what the law is, people are going to behave a certain way anyway. Right? This is what I call the they're going to do it anyway argument. And we see this constantly in the American political context when we're discussing moral and social issues. Take abortion. They're going to do it anyway, so let's just make abortion safe, rare, and legal. I wish that that were true. They're going to be gay relationships anyway, so let's just legalize same-sex marriage. Kids are going to have sex anyway, so let's not try to just teach them abstinence. That's futile. Let's teach them how to have sex and to do it safely. Now imagine if we reasoned the same way in driver's education when it came to drunk driving. Well, kids are going to get drunk anyway, right? So let's just teach them how to drink and drive safely. And parents would be outraged. But yet this is the same reasoning we're using with Russian roulette of venereal diseases and and the very important issue of becoming pregnant at a premature age. Did I get 6-minute warning, or?
Well, yes.
Are we?
It's supposed to be 3 minutes per person, but since you started with 6, we're giving you 6.
We get 12. We get 12 minutes total.
Joe, we skipped the 3 minutes. I didn't make that clear. I apologize.
I'm sorry. Okay, you're down to 6.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Get me all frustrated there. And really what this argument is saying is this is an efficiency of law argument. The argument is that because the law is not that efficient, people are not going to agree with it, and they're going to do something in opposition to it, that we shouldn't have the law in the books. Well, the problem with that is that no law is 100% efficient or effective. We have laws against the most heinous of crimes, rape and murder, yet people rape and they murder. So at what point does the law have to be efficient to the point where we ignore it? Well, I mean, it obviously problematic. Drug dealers don't like it, the fact that we have laws against drug dealing, nor pimps don't like the fact that we have laws against prostitution. So the efficiency of law, while one argument should be just a factor, should not be a dispositive argument as to whether or not we should have a certain law in society. Now, let's look at the second major argument, and that is this notion of the complete separation of church and state, or the wall of separation between church and state. First things first, what document does this phrase emanate from in our country's history? Well, it doesn't come from the Constitution, doesn't come from the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Magna Carta, or any other official document in our nation's history. So where does it come from? In 2004, there was a Pew poll that showed that 2/3 of Americans thought that the phrase separation of church and state was in the Constitution. Thanks to David Barton, my good friend, and others, we're coming to dispel that notion that that's really not the case. This phrase comes from a letter written by Thomas Jefferson. It was actually in France at the time, written to the Danbury Baptist Association, talking about his views on what he thought the First Amendment should be. Luckily, he was in France and not in the United States at that time. Now, believe it or not, I do believe in a separation of church and state, much to your amazement. But it is a separation of authority, not a separation of influence. And let me explain that. Abraham Kuyper was a Dutch theologian in the late 1800s, and he set forth this wonderful paradigm, I think, which is very helpful to us, called sphere sovereignty. And he argued that there was primarily 3 spheres of authority in society and in civilization. You have the family, the unique authority of the family and parents to discipline children and to rear them and raise them and teach them. You have the authority of the church to define doctrine, the parameters of orthodoxy, to administer the Eucharist, and to determine whatever religion it is, to determine the parameters of that religion, and to remove people from that religion if they don't adhere to them. And then finally, we have the state that has the exclusive power to tax and to the power of the sword, the police power of public policy, to regulate behavior through law and policy. Now, I believe that there should be a separation between the authority of those 3 institutions. Okay, number one, but I also think that that the separation is a one-way wall. In other words, let's examine the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law. Okay, it's not the church. It's saying Congress, and this is for the common folks like myself in the room. Congress, keep your cotton-picking hands out of the free exercise of religion, or from establishing a religion, okay? So the prohibition is binding the hands of Congress one way, not binding the church from influencing the society or the civil government. So what I would submit to you is this so-called doctrine of religious neutrality that the ACLU and the secular left is promoting today is really a very destructive doctrine because the Constitution itself is not neutral toward religion. It's very active toward Congress, make no law regarding the establishment of religion. That's not neutrality. That's very active, saying Congress, don't restrict the free exercise of religion, and that's precisely what has happened. We've turned it around to mean something completely different than what it originally was. Let me say this is very important. The First Amendment was written to protect religious groups from government interference. It was not written to protect non-religious persons from religious persons. I was in a debate in Tampa several years ago, debating Jeremy Gunn, who was actually the a doctor. He heads the ACLU's project on freedom of religion. And I was reading a quote from the Supreme Court that said this was a Christian nation. He stood up and he was very offended. He said, look, I'm a Jewish person, and he says, I'm very offended by that quote. And I said, well, if I moved to Israel and I saw Hebrew symbols in the culture, would you expect me as a Christian to be offended? No, because that's a Hebrew, a Jewish country, and that's what you would expect. And likewise, culturally speaking, America has its root in a faith which is Christian. And so we shouldn't be offended at any of that. And in fact, in religious neutrality, I think the more appropriate doctrine, rather, other than neutrality, is religious accommodation. That is, we should accommodate all religions. The government itself should accommodate all religions. You know, if we have a nativity scene, there should be a creche or whatever it is. There shouldn't be this kind of sterilization from faith in every aspect of all life. Let the free marketplace do its thing, because personally I believe that if that happens, we'll be a freer society, a more informed society, and a more robust society. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this exciting and timely topic with the holidays of many faiths coming around the corner and things going on in the courts relative to social policy. It's a very timely topic. Appreciate the opportunity to share the ACLU point of view as well as some personal perspectives and the opportunity to dialogue with John, who it's my pleasure to meet for the first time. My name is Samir Gupte. I am many things in life. I'm a business executive, I'm a graduate student, small business owner, dog lover, foodie, culinarian, traveler. I'm not an attorney, so please no technical legal questions. I am proud to be the local chapter president of the ACLU, an organization that for the last 90 years has been in existence to promote and protect constitutional rights and liberties. We do our work through public education and outreach, through supporting nonpartisan legislation, and when necessary, through litigation. At times, we do take on controversial issues or defend unpopular figures, but we do this with three goals in mind: democracy, equality, and rule of law. The ACLU's work can be categorized into four areas: racial justice, reproductive rights, LGBT equality, and religious freedom. So that's what brings me to represent the ACLU here today. So we all know what the First Amendment says, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. What seems clear and without debate, and we'll see in a few minutes, is that America, the United States of America, is not intended to be a theocracy. What also seems clear and without debate is that America was founded on individual rights, and the right of the individual to follow or not any faith of their choice is a compelling part of our ethos. And that individual who chooses not to follow a particular faith should not feel any detrimental effects that come from the benefits bestowed by state, local, and federal government. So the question is, what should the role of religion and faith in society be and why? And I'm going to share my perspective on that in just a minute. But first, let me tell you about what the ACLU's stance is on this essential freedom and how we do take many strides to protect the individual, the religious and the non-religious individual rights by keeping government out of religion. So there's no doubt that religion plays a prominent role in American public life. About 76% of the country is Christian, and about 8 to 10% is other religions. So it's almost 90% of America has professed a religious following. That's a fact. And there's no other industrialized democracy, no other country in the OECD that has as much religion in the public square as the United States does. The ACLU has long defended individuals, families, and religious communities who want to manifest their beliefs, their religions in public. ACLU has defended the rights of individuals and groups to display religious symbols and to construct religious edifices that are protected by the Constitution and all of its statutes. The ACLU has supported the right of people to preach their religion in public and even to go door to door trying to convince their neighbors to follow a particular faith. The issue is not religion in the public square, but whether the government should be making decisions about whose texts and whose symbols should be placed on government property and who should be rejected. How do we make that choice? And the ACLU has stepped in to make sure that fairness is paramount in that regard. The ACLU has also taken a stance on children's religious educations, and we believe, and I think most of the audience will, as well as my friend John here, that education should primarily be delivered by the parents and families, and religious communities can play a role in that as well. And the ACLU defends the right of students to practice free speech in the schools, whether it's a religious speech or non-religious speech, and we have live cases about that today. Faith and religion perhaps should and can play a more influential role in American society. I take a step back at times and I think about how much more caring and compassionate society we could be if some tenets of religion were followed more consistently by more people. I think about where our country is today, all the challenges we face, the potential decline of the American empire, the economic challenges, the growing diversity, the environment. There's many roles that formal religion and faith could play, but that decision must be left to the individual. Formal religion has an opportunity to define their message, to market it, to brand it, and to deliver it so that people have a choice, so that they're convinced to follow a particular faith, not compelled to through law or public policy. Our religious leaders walking the talk can demonstrate the benefits and reasons to follow these particular faiths. There's opportunities to do that more and better today for all aspects of formal religion in America. The Constitution is basically the foundation for all laws in America, but hovering above or over the Constitution is the Declaration of Independence. And there's a statement that we all probably have memorized, just in case I'm going to read it to you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every time I read, see, or hear that, I get the chills because it's such a poignant, powerful statement. But there's a particular pair of words in there that really amplify this issue for me. And the fact that these learned white gentlemen from 240-ish years ago chose the word there and not the, how did they know what a diverse country this was going to turn into? How did they know that there would be different perspectives on who or what the Creator is for different people? And I've done some research on it, was not able to find any compelling evidence as to the debate or discussion about that particular word, but maybe it's selective interpretation, but I really do believe that they made a concerted choice to use the word their Creator versus the Creator. The most compelling and sustainable advantage that we have as a country is not our natural resources, clearly not our healthcare system or our educational institutions. Seemingly not even our military might, financial system, or cultural institutions anymore. I believe at the highest order it's our human capital, specifically the diversity of it. Historically, we've attracted individuals from all over the world who came to America to fully realize their potential, as there's no other country in the world where you can do, be, or have anything regardless of your starting point or your birth status. But if our national ethos morphs into one driven by any one particular religion, will we continue to be able to attract the human capital that has fueled innovation, entrepreneurialism, and the back-breaking toil that has built the most powerful and influential nation state in the world civilization? Will it embrace and enable the full realization of all our citizens today? And will more formal role for religion in defining public policy and law ensure that justice and liberty for all is practiced? And our argument on all three fronts is no. Do believe that religion can and perhaps should play limited and invisible role in defining public policy and law, but must not be formally endorsed in and through any government institutions. We can't argue with the fact that religion may have been one of the components influencing the founding of this country. It was a significant part of the life of most of our founding fathers. But other things were as well. The Enlightenment philosophers, nature, the study of tyrannical regimes, all contributed to how these founding fathers crafted the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution to set us forth to prosper. The Establishment Clause, we believe, was intended to protect both religion from government and for individuals from unduly being influenced by any particular religion. A theocracy or a biblical/Sharia-based country is not what we're all about. It's not good for the country. It's not good for individuals. Theocracies stagnate, and we have many challenges facing us today. We believe that individuality is what founded this country and should drive the choice and the action and rights, especially when it pertains to the separation of church and state. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Samir. That was a very, actually a very tame presentation, given what I know about the ACLU. I wonder if there should be maybe a couple of branches of the ACLU, the more civil and more reasonable ACLU, and then the more radical ACLU, because the ACLU is a very radical organization. I mean, this is a group that is trying to shut down Boy Scouts because they have God in their oath, and they shouldn't have, somehow they can't go into public schools, and use them because they're taxpayer facilities, trying to remove and basically sterilize religious symbols from the rest of society. I mean, these are the kind of positions that the ACLU is taking. So while I appreciate the more reasoned tone that Samir has given this morning, I don't think that reflects the ACLU nationally, that the group that he's representing. America was not intended to be a theocracy. Well, it depends on what you mean by theocracy. Certainly, there's a difference, I think, between law and morality. I mean, murder is a law that's consistent with the Ten Commandments, but we don't outlaw it just because it's in the Ten Commandments, right? There's law and confession. I don't think anyone here is claiming that we should have laws that say the law of the land should be that Jesus Christ is Lord. I mean, no one's saying that I'm aware of. There's law and doctrine. No one's advocating that it should be the law of the land in the state of Florida or otherwise, that we believe in a triune God who exists eternally in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in a Christian context. And then there's law and belief. Okay, so in other words, there's how you believe about things. And law and behavior. Well, law is intended to regulate behavior. And if that law happens to be undergirded based upon a religious construct, based upon a Judeo-Christian worldview, I don't have a problem with that because, again, you can legislate morality, and in fact, every law is an imposition of some person's morality upon the rest of society. And I think it's also important to distinguish between the church gathered and the church distributed. The church gathered, perhaps for some legal, be it legitimate or illegitimate, or theological, may have some limitations, but the church distributed is just, or religious people distributed for that matter, are just simply citizens, and they don't strip their citizenship at the door just because they leave the four walls of their synagogue or their church. So again, this notion of strict neutrality is very, very dangerous. There's many examples of strong partnerships in society between church and state. One church, one child, Jeb Bush's attempt to get every church to adopt a child throughout the state. Faith-based prison ministries have proven to be very, very effective. And faith-based distribution of social and welfare services also equally effective as well. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think it's a compliment that I'm not a radical, but I'm not sure yet. We do have diversity within the ACLU, and there's many paths to get to the same destination. So maybe it more reflects my personality. Couple of points I wanted to make vis-a-vis John's opening piece. can you legislate morality? And I think, he certainly hit on an important point, a question of whose morality. And we can't deny that aspects of formal religion and a belief in a higher being contribute to defining our laws and defining our public policy. But where do you draw the line? And whose religion do you pick? Do you go to the route of Saudi Arabia and Iran and take what's in the Quran and either pick the Old Testament or the New Testament and you make that your law? Or do you take some of the general themes around compassion and the greater good and looking out for others, do unto others as you do yourself? Do you take some of the themes that exist within the Old Testament and New Testament and make that part of what defines your law and what defines your public policy? So I don't know whose morality we would pick. I mean, if you take any particular religion you choose is fractured or divided. Take Christianity. Do you go the Catholic route, the Orthodox route, or the Protestant route? Within the Protestant route, do you go Anglican, Calvinist, Episcopalian, evangelical? I don't know. And then how does that fit over time? Will that stand the test of time as this country is getting more diverse, as our society changes? If you pick one particular religion to be the basis for your law and public policy, 50, 100 years from now, what will that be? One of the most amazing things about the Constitution is its timelessness. Also wanted to take a minute to address the wording of the absence of the words, the separation of church and state, not being in any formal government document. We all remember the Christine O'Donnell episode that was all over the airwaves during the election, that technically she was right and John is right. It doesn't show up in any formal government document, but for some writings that we found from Thomas Jefferson. It is also in one official government document shortly after the country was formed. I don't know, you guys and students, you look like students, so you may remember the pirates of the Barbary Coast and kind of picking off American ships. So there was a Treaty of Tripoli in 1797, and in that treaty, which is an official document, it says, as the government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws and religion or tranquility of Muslims. Thank you. How would you address, or what are your thoughts on the changing society and the diversification of America and the perspective that could be received by non-Christians that this is a Christian nation, and if you're not a avowed Christian, you're less than a first-class citizen who would receive all the rights and benefits of being an American, a resident of America?
Sure, that's a great question. I would note that there's really no other religion that could have produced what we know as the American experience other than Christianity. Hinduism doesn't give you America. Okay? Certainly, Islam doesn't give you America. It gives you the caliphate, and a complete geopolitical system being imposed by Sharia law. It is the unique undergirding of Judeo-Christian, distinctly Christian ethics and presuppositions that give us the American experience, the freest country in the world, both economically and religiously speaking. So this notion that somehow Christianity is oppressive is really a false one. I would say that the answer to the question specifically is found in the principle of accommodation. I would commend to you Stephen Carter's book. He is not a Christian that I'm aware of, but The Culture of Disbelief really talks about this notion of accommodation, lays it out quite nicely as opposed to this concept of neutrality where we want to sterilize and the society from any and all religious expression, which I don't think is healthy, and it does not help to promote religion or allow religion to be freely. It actually does quite the opposite. What it does strict religious neutrality actually establishes secularism or humanism as the official dogma of the state. Because if you remove systematically faith in every nook and cranny of society, that's what you get. Ironically, something that the framers were trying to avoid, that is a federal national establishment of religion. So neutrality gives you actually the very opposite thing that the framers wanted and stifles religious freedom.
And your question for Samir.
Yes. I am very intrigued, Samir, by your reasonable view of these matters, given the fact that you are leading the ACLU. And so I guess I would ask you, and I realize you can't be responsible for everything, but I was in this community several years ago and represented Rabbi Joseph Konakov, who is with the Chabad of South Orlando. He was, after 9/11, praying for the dead that he knew back in New York City, and 10 men were gathering every morning to pray in the Minyan, and a county code enforcement officer knocked on his door on the day of Purim, which is ironically a day where Jewish people celebrate religious freedom and from persecution, and they said, "You're operating a synagogue, you have to shut it down." And I battled for 5 years in federal court to defend his rights and to show that the statute was unconstitutional. So I guess my first question is, where was the ACLU when that was happening? You also indicate that you are interested in the religious rights of children, and I recall last year defending Rivka Berry from religious persecution and her rights of conscience, a young child that was being threatened with death from her parents if she did not denounce her faith, and the ACLU did not come to my defense or her defense or give any connections at all. So I'm asking you, why aren't they involved in those cases?
Unfortunately, I don't have any information about whether or not we were requested to partner with you or defend either the rabbi or Rivka Berry, but theoretically we would look at those kind of cases as freedom to practice your religion. There's a couple of websites out there if you're interested in studying what the ACLU is doing to protect religious freedom. There's one, acluforchristians.com or .org, and then I don't remember the other one off the top of my head, but there's a detailed list of cases that for Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, that detail what the ACLU is doing to protect the individual rights to practice and express your religion in those cases. I know we are working with the pastor, I can't remember his name, of the Westboro Baptist Church out of Topeka, Kansas, taken his case, and then there's a case up in Alachua County schools of the pastor that was going to burn the Qurans had proposed that his members wear T-shirts that said Islam is of the devil, and because that is free speech, as much as we detest the language, that's not our place to judge. And so we have taken on the case to defend the students again who were expelled from Alachua County for wearing T-shirt that was on the front of one T-shirt, and then there was a biblical phrase on the back of the T-shirt, and they were expelled, and we are defending them, and that's working its way through the court system.
I have a question for you as the director of the ACLU, and given the wide variety of cases that the ACLU has been involved in, have there been any cases that the ACLU has been involved in that you personally think overstepped and they should have been? And any specific cases that if it was you, you wouldn't have done that, but they did?
There are cases. I'd rather not go into the details of which ones. I mean, in my role, I have to, in public, have to support after debating and discussing in closed doors which cases to take on. When you're a member of an organization, any organization, I don't think you necessarily agree with everything that organization does. That goes for my employer. That goes for my small business, my education, and the ACLU. So there are things that we will take on, we will debate and discuss, and for the greater good of the organization, you do have to support the organization that you're leading.
Next question.
Mr. Gupte, this question is also directed to you. It appears that Mr. Stemberger and yourself have both recommended that the government can't endorse any particular religion. So what's the difference between your view and Mr. Stemberger's view?
Great question. I do think it's that fuzzy area between, I think we clearly agree that America's not a theocracy, nor do we want it to be a purely secular society. So it's where's the line? Is it, because a particular religion says that homosexuality is a sin, does that mean that should drive public policy and law relative to those who are homosexual and want to be full members and receive the full benefits of being in a particular society? Or does it end where the theme of a particular religion or all religion is, do unto others as you do yourself, and compassion and caring and integrity? So it's that kind of that middle area where it's pretty fuzzy, and the courts have spent a lot of time looking at cases in there trying to define. The Constitution is not a perfect document. It's certainly not. I mean, it's an amazing document, but it's not an interesting read, which is why you won't find cool phrases like separation of church and state in the Constitution. Those come up through society, through letters, through debates and discussion. But I think we're not that far off. I think, our perspective in the ACLU and my personal perspective is that religion perhaps should play a greater role in society if it influenced every person in how to act, how to be the best person they can be, and how to act towards their neighbors and towards others.
Next question.
Same question for the other man. Thank you. This is for the gentleman of the ACLU. You were talking about how the nation is changing through time, and indeed it is. We have less and less religion. It's being taken from our public places, and I'm assuming that you think that's a good thing.
Personally, I would like to see more people, if they choose, follow a particular religion, because I think religion can provide guidance on how to be the best person that you can be and how to live better with others. Now, we're clearly not humanity is not perfect, and so there's opportunities to learn how to be more perfect, but we'll never achieve perfection. That's kind of inherent in the definition of being human. I have a deep religious belief. I believe deeply in God. Haven't necessarily picked a particular religion. I've read the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, the Gita, the Buddha's writings. I go to churches, mosques, synagogues. Had a great feeling, physiological reaction being in places of worship. So I have a deep belief in the benefits of following a particular religion. My perspective, personally, and the ACLU's perspective, is that government selecting a particular religion to define public policy, to drive what the law should be, is precluded by the Constitution, and that it's important to keep the two separate, both for religion and for those the 15% of Americans that choose not to believe in religion also have a fundamental right to practice and enjoy all the benefits of being an American citizen.
John,
Yeah, I wanted to just comment briefly. I think the primary problem here is that Samir is very reasonable. He's very collegial. He's very nice. What we really need is Alan Grayson up here to really show you the face of the ACLU. And if this is the new face of the ACLU, I think I like the ACLU. But I can't see that represented nationwide. And so you really have to look beyond that to see what's happening. And you really do see, I guess a question that I would have, again, rhetorically, do you believe in religious neutrality? Because religious neutrality is a very dangerous doctrine which strips us from all expression of religious faith in society.
John, seriously, I have a question for you.
Thank you.
Knowing that you're a constitutional scholar,
No.
The fact that God is not mentioned in the Constitution, do you think this is deliberate or was it oversight?
Well, you know, when they sign it, they say in the year of our Lord, so actually it does mention it, and it's certainly the First Amendment, so there's an assumption there. I think that, the Declaration certainly mentions it.
Constitution.
I understand. But when you look at the totality of, the fact that the Constitution itself doesn't mention it, it's certainly the First Amendment addresses religion, again, addresses Congress as it relates to religion. So it's not neutral. It's very active in its approach to looking at Congress's or the government or the state's action toward religious expression. And when you look at you can't take a tour of Washington, D.C. and not see symbols filled. I mean, the Supreme Court itself has the Ten Commandments and all kinds of faith symbols everywhere. And so you really can't look at that and see, oh, well, there's no part of religion in public life, at least historically. It's overwhelming.
Would you have a comment to follow that?
There's no doubt, as I said earlier, that religion has played a role in creating our country. The question is, what should that role be? And that's kind of what our topic was here today. And we'll continue to reiterate the fact that it's important for government to play a strong role in keeping formal religion out of dictating public policy and the law, and that the role of religion should continue to be one that's driven by the individual, that's selected by the individual, it's taught by the family, that's taught by the thousands of churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples. There's a plethora of opportunities to convey a compelling message versus legislating one that all of us, regardless of our particular religious faith, should be compelled to follow.
Next question.
For both of you, I'd like a comment from each one. You said that the United States became a great nation, correct? And the foundation was Christian because the founding fathers were Christian, so they influenced the founding of our nation. The reaction, what I would like to know is now that we're removing these Christian elements, how is that affecting either the weakening or the strengthening of our country?
I did say that the United States is a great nation and believe that we still are and will be for many years to come. I think I also said that the founding fathers were, I don't know if I said that they were Christian, but they were Christian. What we don't know is to what degree were they Christian. I mean, we clearly know that there weren't any Muslim or Hindu or Sikh founding fathers, right? And we also know that there were some atheists, deists, but we don't have unequivocal evidence as to the degree and depth of Christianity of our founding fathers. As we go back to all the letters that were written, the recording of the debates and the discussions, it's clear that some aspects of Christianity were part of how they decided to frame our country. But it's also clear that they looked at the Enlightenment philosophers, that they all studied pre-Socratic Greek philosophers, that they all studied Roman philosophy, that some of them were naturalists. There were historians that looked at all the tyrannical regimes. This is all detailed in the letters and the dialogues and the debates that were going back and forth. So, are we removing Christianity from America? That's not clear to me. We're removing it, we're keeping it out of the public space because that's what we at the ACLU believe the Establishment Clause was intended to do. You can't extract it from people's heads and hearts who sit in Congress or who sit in the White House. So it is going to play a part of how our laws and our public policy gets defined. But our perspective in the ACLU is that the wall or the separation of formal religion playing a role in government has to remain as it's been defined in the courts. And that's for the benefit of the country, for all the individuals, religious and non-religious.
We have 7 questions, so Paula?
Sure, again, I'm not sure anyone is attempting to make religion formal in society. Again, no one's attempting to impose doctrine or views about the nature and character of God, if he exists or not. These kinds of things are not being trying to be legislative. The question was really whether the removal of Christianity is a good thing or a bad thing. And I think that it's not the removal of Christianity; it's the removal of the presuppositions of morality that's being removed. And I think it's horrific. I mean, it's produced cataclysmic social change. I mean, things that were unthinkable 50 years ago are now not only thinkable, but they're being afforded the full protection of the Constitution, and rights being smuggled by judges who really don't care about the rule of law, creating like Play-Doh rights out of the air, out of the Equal Protection Clause, as if it were some fungible product or something. And so it's horrific. It's produced devastation to what we know as the family, confusion about what is the difference between men and women. Oh, goodness. I mean, the assault of pornography upon the innocent of children, I mean, and under the auspices of free speech. I mean, that's nonsense. The founders understood free speech to be religious, political debate, legal debate, not obscenity, and so we've no longer able to even discern that. And so I think that's really rather crazy for us to do in society. The redefinition of marriage. I mean, every religion, every major religion believes that marriage is between a man and a woman. Yet all of a sudden we want to redefine that. And we've talked about this before, and I could talk about this for hours, as you know. But these are some examples of how we've done this. The destruction of human life, from the womb to the, taking the plug from mom and dad because they're becoming a burden on society. The devaluing of human life. All of these things are as a result of removing the Judeo-Christian ethic.
Next question.
This question is for Mr. Gupte. You said before that you studied many religions, and talking about education now, do you think that that as an effort to promote religious neutrality, that people should be taught, that children should be taught atheism, like atheism, evolution, Big Bang Theory, instead of any other sort of religious neutrality aspects, like perhaps teaching them alongside each other?
I guess I find it hard to categorize evolution and the Big Bang Theory as part of religion. It seems like that's a pretty proven scientific fact. Both of those, the Big Bang Theory is the formation of the universe, and then evolution is from all scientific evidence, a fact. So clearly that needs to be taught in science. Now, teaching atheism as a part of science probably doesn't make sense. If there's a social, from what I recall in social studies or civics, as some schools call it, there are studies of religion from a comparative perspective, and without particularly espousing one religion over the other, that makes sense, and we have actually defended that in court.
Microevolution is a fact. The evolution within a species has been seen empirically. Macroevolution, the evolution of a species into something else, let's say a rat into a bat, has not been seen. It's not seen in the fossil record, and there's great dispute over that by major scientists, and so that's not a fact when we speak of evolution. Secondly, take a topic like intelligent design. The scientific observation that there is order in the universe, from the microscopic level, how the electrons orbit the nucleus of the atom, to the cosmic level of how the planets orbit the sun. There's design there. It's not random, and to infer that there is an intelligent source of that, which, by the way, the Big Bang, if you look at that, we know that the universe is expanding, so what does that mean? If you're blowing up a balloon, it's expanding. It had a point of singularity where it started. Okay, so all of these things have inferences, scientific inferences, that the possibility of a supernatural cause of the universe coming into being is not something that's out of question. And so simply because it happens to look and smell religious, if the scientific evidence leads us there, we ought to be able to discuss that, something that the ACLU would vigorously oppose.
Retired federal judge David Danziger. Question?
Oh my goodness.
My question is this. First of all, the separation of church and state, as Jefferson originated in his letter, has been through a lot of legal stuff, legal decisions have been issued that kind of define this a little better. But I think your preoccupation here is the federal government's involvement in religion. I'm concerned about some of the local government aspects of it. For example, if a city suddenly decides that 5 times a day there's going to be a blast for everybody to pray at that particular time in their mosque, whether that's objectionable. The other thing is the ACLU has brought many cases where they're trying to eliminate the influence of Christians in the public schools. However, in California, they have had the children observing, trying to imitate the life of a Muslim by observing Ramadan and all that kind of stuff. And the ACLU never bothered to interfere with that. I wonder why that is the case. It seems to me that there's a preference for protecting the rights of Muslims as against the rights of Christians.
Yeah, we don't have that preference, and there are several cases. I would refer you to the ACLU for Christians website that spell out the details of many cases where we've defended the rights of Christians, of Christian teachers, of Christian students, of Christians in prison, of Christians in society in general to practice and express their faith.
Yeah, there's clearly a inconsistency as it relates to how we view Islam today. It's become almost like a new protected class, where there's literally classes in K through 12 on how to sensitize children toward Islam that would be unthinkable in the Jewish or Christian traditions, happening all around the country. And so there's an inconsistency there, and we need to look at that, because that's not a good thing at all. I think it's also interesting to note that in the founding of the time of the First Amendment, there really were established churches in each of the states. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm just saying this is the context in which this arises. They were concerned about a national religion. And in fact, in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, you had primarily congregational states, officially congregational states, which had very Puritan influence. In Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, you had Anglican states. They had official Episcopal influence. And so this is the concern was a federal establishment, not necessarily, that's the only religion they knew, was established religion. And so they wanted a plurality where if you wanted to be this kind of religion, you moved to that state. So they wanted a plurality of Christian religions. That was the original idea at the time of the adoption of the First Amendment.
Actually, I just want to respond to that last point, if I may. Yes, there were a number of colonies that were chartered based upon a particular religion. The Quakers in Pennsylvania, the Puritans in Massachusetts. Roger Williams had a religious charter for Rhode Island. There's no doubt about that from a colony perspective. And as these colonies became states, some may have had official state religions early on, but once the Bill of Rights was passed, I believe that changed. And interestingly, I looked at a 2006 Gallup study. You're all familiar with Gallup, right? 2006 Gallup study that ranked the states based upon religious attendance. And interestingly, 6 of the original 13 states were in the bottom 10 in terms of church attendance. So I wonder if that over time, as the compulsion to follow a particular religion went away, that people opted out of practicing that.
I'm going to follow up on the judge's question, and that in Oklahoma, SQ 755, there was an anti-Sharia legislation that is now going through the courts. Munir Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations filed a lawsuit. 70% of the population of Oklahoma agreed that this anti-Sharia legislation, in agreement with Article 6 of the Constitution, yet CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, filed a lawsuit basically saying that this legislation violated the religious rights of Munir Awad Yet you had said earlier that Sharia or Islamic law is actually a political, religious, theocratic doctrine. Where does the ACLU stand on this issue, saying as if there is an interlocking directorship between the ACLU and the Council on American Islamic Relations? And John can follow up with your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm slightly familiar with that case. I don't have a lot of the details of that, but from what I understand, there was a ballot initiative in Oklahoma that passed that said we will not have Sharia law in Oklahoma, and we are not either defending the Council on American Islamic Relations, nor are we party to the suit at this time. From what I heard from our religious freedom attorney, I do find it interesting. I quite honestly don't understand the purpose behind the ballot initiative. I mean, the First Amendment would any attempt to make Sharia a codified part of Oklahoma statute would be struck down by the courts, it seems. So it's not clear to me what the purpose of both the ballot initiative was, as well as the follow-up lawsuit.
Well, the purpose was to prevent the formation of the caliphate, which is the imposition of the geopolitical system of Sharia law upon the rest of society, something that people who follow original Islam, that's the end game, that's the end goal for them. And so the complexity in this particular case, though, is that what this arose from the fact that within the Muslim community, they wanted to have their own private tribunals to resolve disputes, which then those decisions would have to be then reviewed by other courts. So it is rather complex, because I think most of us would agree that private arbitrations, even in the Christian tradition, there's this notion that we should resolve our disputes, and the Bible even refers to church courts. And so I think that it's a little bit of a tricky line there. I would support that particular amendment, because I think it is a problem. We need it because there's a group of people that are trying to impose the Islamic rule upon the rest of society. And so it is a needed thing.
My question is for the religious gentlemen, so you might as well stay at the podium. Your characterization of secularism as a religion really bothers me. It seems to me so many religious people declare that anybody who believes in anything is then forming their own religion. One very religious person I knew didn't believe in evolution, of course, and said that anybody who did was forming their own religion, and he was for separation of church and state, so therefore he was against evolution. Your characterization of evolution showed quite a lack of scientific understanding of what is involved in evolution. You'll accept microevolution, but not macroevolution, and all of this. In other words, you're picking and choosing.
There's millions of missing links showing, for instance, if a rat over a period of time evolved into a bat, we ought to see not one, but hundreds of intermediate rat bats. But we don't see that. We see rats in the fossil record, we see bats.
You're wrong there.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to look at...
You have no scientific background.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't, but I've studied science, and I know what the fossil record shows. And so there ought to be millions of these intermediate forms. Now, with the specific question you were asking, though, is regarding secularism, and that's a very good question. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that secular humanism is a religion. A religion is a systematic belief system which addresses ultimate issues, addresses the issue of whether or not there's a God, addresses the supernatural. And so if you look at the criteria for what a religion is, those that are systematically secular and humanist in their orientation, it certainly qualifies as a dogma or as a religious viewpoint. And so there lies the problem. If you remove all of religion, you're in essence establishing at least a secular viewpoint in a dogmatic way in society, which we do not think is healthy for the rest of the culture.
This question is for Mr. Gupte. I come from a country with an established church and no attendance at the church at all. When This prayer in schools was stopped in America following a court case. Was that brought by the ACLU that stopped prayer in school?
I'm not sure if we actually brought the first suit, but we have been involved in several suits where teachers or administrators were trying to impose.
But my question is this. Following that case, have our schools improved?
Our schools are not in good shape. Now, I can't stand up here and make a correlation between the end of praying and the decline of the education system. I think there's a lot of factors that have gone into it.
I don't think there's been much discussion at all as to the tremendous role that religion plays in presidential politics. In the beginning of our society, most presidents were Episcopalian. In fact, it was a joke, if you wanted to become president, you better be an Episcopalian. Then we had Kennedy becoming the first Roman Catholic, and there was a big to-do about that. Wow, we didn't think he'd ever get elected. He was a Catholic of all things. And then you go into the presidential politics before Obama was elected, and I'm sure that Romney, for example, being a Mormon, that was one factor that he never made it to be a finalist. There was an awful lot of things said against Mormons. I guess they thought he was going to have 10 wives or something like that. And then you've got the Christian right, I would say, put Bush in power. George Bush, very strong Christian right. And I have one item here. Romney didn't become a finalist.
Is there a question there?
Well, the question is actually, I'd like to get the consensus or the opinions of both speakers.
I guess I'll go first. I'm already standing here. It is a sad part of, a sad aspect of inclusion in America that to hold a statewide or a national office, if you're not an avowed, active, perceived follower of the Christian religion, you really don't have a chance. I think about, my family's from India originally, so I'm Indian American. There's 2 Indian American governors who, without them being, one's Catholic and one is Baptist. And neither of them, and they both converted. They were both, one was born, raised Hindu, the other one was a Sikh. And, if you followed the news in South Carolina, Nikki Haley, which is her new name, she would not have been able to achieve that election if she had not been a Baptist in South Carolina and been visible and vocal about that. Even then she was challenged. Even then there were many naysayers who said, well, you're just doing it to get elected. So that's an evolving part of America that is still a work in progress.
Good observation. It's always going to be a part of the process because we're a religious people, and so that will always play into the debate and into the dynamic of a presidential election. I think that Richard, your point is very well taken, and what it is that when you remove God, you remove the basis for asserting moral authority within the absolute nature. Moral laws proceed from a lawmaker, and if there's no absolute lawmaker, there's no absolute law, and everything is just merely relative in the sight of each person. And so it does create a moral chaos, and some of the chaos that we've been seeing not only in schools but in society as a whole.
Next question. Well, I want to comment first on your observation that removing God from church or from schools. About the same time they did that, they eliminated recess too. So my question would be for you, sir. Regarding Thomas Jefferson and his letter, Danbury letter, what is it about him as a founding father that you don't accept his particular interpretation of what the intent was regarding separation of church and state?
What I don't accept is that his interpretation never made it to the language of the First Amendment, very simply. In other words, if he had his way, I'm sure that the First Amendment might read that there shall be a wall of separation between the church and state. And so that's not what the collective wisdom of the framers chose for the language of the First Amendment.
Follow-up.
Sure.
Why then would we have a Supreme Court making judgments on the U.S. Constitution? They're offering interpretations and analysis based on the applications of it.
Sure.
Thomas Jefferson, one of our premier founding fathers, made a very direct comment and assessment of what was to happen. And you're saying that's not valid, but then you'll take court decisions and say they are valid. Explain that dichotomy.
Yeah, no, clearly it's persuasive. It's his opinion. He was not a judge when he said it, and so it's not legal precedent. Some legal precedent's good, some of it's bad. Some of it's consistent with the text of the Constitution. Some of it's just crazy stuff that people want to make up because they want to, judges see themselves as change agents to radically move along society instead of just interpreting the rule of law, interpreting the writ that's in front of them.
Thank you, everyone. Great questions. I enjoyed the time and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all.
Every question gets a turn, if you'd like to say.
Well, I was going to ask him a question, maybe.
I'll answer it for him.
And I understood him to speech said that about 15% of the people do not have religion or believe in God. And my question would be, our founding fathers wanted us to have freedom of religion. It seems like the ACLU wants us to have freedom from religion. So why do 85% of us have to yield to 15%? When are they going to yield to us?
Point well taken. That goes back to my observation that the purpose of the First Amendment is to protect religious people from government intervention. It's not to protect non-religious people from the existence of religious people. Now, I will say that the Constitution does exist to protect the rights of minorities, but that does not, there's a balance, there's a tension between the collective wisdom in a democracy, a representative democracy, of what the majority of people think versus the protection of the Constitution, which give rights to people. The problem is that this notion of rights has just become this, like I said, Play-Doh, and so it's meaningless, and so the left is just attempting to create rights out of the air. Yes.
Really, John, this isn't for you. I wanted to speak to the gentleman who had to leave immediately. But, he was saying Thomas Jefferson with the separation of church and state. Yet, John, it's true. We both studied a lot of what Barton has done and shown. That when Thomas Jefferson was the schoolmaster of America, it was mandated that every child would study the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Bible. My question for him was, we're talking about Muslims becoming a protected class, and under the TSA rules, women in burqas are not going to have to go through either a pat-down or the stunningly vivid a machine that displays everything a woman has or a man.
I've not heard that. That's an exception.
It had been on the news, and the lady who was the director for CARE was saying that women in the headscarves could do their own pat-downs and then have their hands swabbed. I wanted to know what the ACLU would do for those of us who hold that we don't want to be seen naked or groped by anyone. And why is their religious beliefs any more important than mine when going through security?
Alan, have you heard that about that? If that's the case, that's rather stunning, and it's rather offensive that they would just carve out that particular religion for whatever reason when, out of interest of modesty, there are hundreds of Christians and Jews that would not want to be scanned so that you could be seen practically nude.
This on Fox News, that makes a difference. On all honesty, I watch all the news stations, and there's a station that's for entertainment and controversy, and there's a station for news.
Well, that should that is your opinion on it. That doesn't happen to be
Okay.
everybody's.
But the information you receive has no, you haven't said where you received it. It was on TV, therefore I believe it. Okay.
Well, it was the woman
in all
from
due
CARE
respect.
herself that was saying it.
Yes, go ahead.
The difficulty that I have is, as a non-religious person, the difficulty I have with the morals and ethics debate that seemingly is constant when it comes to Christianity or any other religious source, is that why is it, it's sort of a generalized question, but why is it that most religious people, I say most, this is generalized, who actually seemingly, particularly the more to the right, evangelical, etc., seemingly believe, either through ignorance or gullibility, and it's probably both, that atheists or people of no religious faith have lesser morals and ethics. I mean, and you constantly go on, and we can document these things on TV of all these supposed religious and Christian leaders that are immoral, doing immoral things.
Sure.
Okay, it's constant. When's the last time you saw news? And believe me, if they had this story, I think every news station would run it. Atheist commits pedophilia. Atheist commits adultery. Or, well, adultery is not a big deal. It's not the Ten Commandments, so it's okay. But the morals and ethics of an individual who is non-religious is the one that's being prejudiced against. And we, if there's any other atheists in the room, get tired of people looking at you like, oh, God, you don't believe the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, great question. I would not say that atheists are less moral. I would say that they philosophically lack a basis for any absolute morality. That's what I would say. There's a big difference. And the difference also between the two is that for a person that has no absolute standards, is really not proclaiming any morality for the rest of society, for them to violate, there's no hypocrisy there. You can't create hypocrisy because they're really not standing for anything. However, a person that is standing for something and saying this is the right thing, it's a very high standard. Well, there could be hypocrisy because there's an inconsistency between their own life and the very high standard that they're attempting to articulate. So that's how I would respond to that question.
John, I was disappointed that Samir had to leave too because I wanted to hear both your responses on this. But would you just briefly give your opinion on, when we talk about such a diverse culture, especially as America is right now, how do you believe that should look in the public schools when we're talking about what's going to happen with legislation or what's going to happen in the public realm and the whole idea of separation of church and state or whatever? How do we make room for the diversity that's there, and at the same time
in public schools?
Yeah, right. And at the same time, when we have Christian parents or Muslim parents or parents of any other type who are raising their children a certain way and are seeing requirements of the school brought to bear on their children that are inappropriate to their faith, how do we do that? I'm thinking of specific requirements like sexual education that might be inappropriate if a person is really trying to help their child become abstinent, or a situation where LGBT material is being taught through the realm of children's books. How do we balance all those things in a diverse society?
It's a great question, and a lot to be said there. The problem is that the courts have ruled that when you send your kids to government schools, ultimately you teach them what the government wants them to teach. The answer to that is more parental involvement, both from the school board level, as in you do this or I'm going to replace you, down to the curriculum debates that are being had. But it is a challenging situation. I think, again, not neutrality rather, but accommodation of plurality is the answer. For instance, we, in art class, draw your favorite symbol for your favorite religion in a holiday form, okay, and not spank the kid because he draws a Jesus in the manger. Prayer, I'm not a big fan of prayer in school, actually. I think that that becomes problematic on a number of levels, but to recognize a moment of silent meditation or prayer, I have no problem with that at all. I mean, the Hindu can pray to his God. I mean, but again, it's the recognition of God and religion as opposed to the non-recognition of that religion and creating a secular state by inference. And so that is the thing. And so I don't know why anyone would object to a moment of silent meditation or prayer. for them to meditate on anything from their navel and, in a state of nirvana to, glorifying Jesus as your religion would have you to do.
I always thought, when I read about no establishment of a religion by the government, in those times it was fresh in their memory of the conflict in Ireland and England and in all of Europe between Protestants and Catholics. And they saw how destructive it was to have a state religion. And that was the motive behind their restriction and the First Amendment.
No, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the primary motives for the whole founding of the country, was the oppression from, the state, which was synonymous with the church at the time there. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I agree on something, John.
I wanted to say first, thank you actually for what you said about prayer in schools. That's something that for me is really the point. It shouldn't be labeled as prayer or to any particular religion, but in fact a moment of silence. And if you just want to think about what you're going to do that day, or you're going to pray to some God, so be it. It's when it becomes a prayer and it's led by somebody, and it's on a specific religion, I think, whereas a lot of people would have a problem. To the lady's point, my question to you, as far as the presidents throughout history and their connection to any one particular religion, do you find it to be a problem facing any, in other words, have the thought of, okay, our nation is, as you would say, based on Christian principles or some sort of Christian foundation. Do you understand that the implications behind that, in that you've got people who are quote unquote politicians in the most derogatory sense of that word, who are going to claim that religion, and in this case Christianity, and in 50 years they might claim some other Martian religion if that's where the country is. That is their first and grandest lie. That is their way of getting into the realm of politics, and they'll continue that lie as long as it's necessary. And
can you kind of summarize? I'm trying to get the essence of what you're...
that if you allow yourself to accept and appreciate somebody who says, "Hey, I'm a Christian," and therefore, okay, we're gonna nominate this person, we're gonna put this person up on a platform, as opposed to that guy who we think is an atheist and he's not claiming to be a Christian, he must be inherently bad as a politician. That then brings about the corruption that we have in politics. That is their first and their grandest lie, and from there it only gets worse.
Some very thoughtful comments. I'm just not sure how to respond to a question there.
I believe we have the final question over here. Anyone else? We don't want to miss anybody. One back there.
Back in the 1980s, in the Supreme Court County of Allegheny versus ACLU, they decided that a creche on the steps of the Pittsburgh County courthouse was unconstitutional, but on the norm right next to it was constitutional. I would like to get Mr. Gupte's opinion on that. However, in your view, was that a violation of separation in church and state, or would that be under the Establishment Clause?
No, in my view, and the Supreme Court has taken a view which I don't think is a good one. They have this lemon test, which determines whether there's excessive entanglement or not, and different tests for these things. Again, I think accommodation is the best route. I mean, there's been many examples of privately funded religious symbols. For instance, in the Grand Canyon, there was for decades privately purchased non-sectarian psalms, just talking about the grandeur of the creation kind of thing that goes with what you're seeing. And of course, some law clerk from the ACLU, after decades, researched this and was offended by it. So they sent one letter, and all of a sudden that was removed from that park. Again, no reason why that has to be the case. You could have easily had a verse from the Quran there that was equally expressing something, and it's just diversity. Again, it doesn't have to be funded by the state. That would be a different issue. But if it's privately funded, there shouldn't be any issue with that.
Well, there's so many things I would like to say and ask that I could spend an hour. Don't take, you can't get in this microphone. But let me just talk about this semantic hair splitting of from religion and of religion. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. That means freedom from religion, or the free exercise thereof. That means freedom to have a religion. So let's stop that silly argument. Also, Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the people who was most instrumental in the Constitution, writing of the Constitution and writing of the Bill of Rights, certainly ought to know what the phrase freedom of religion
You know, Thomas
meant.
Jefferson didn't write the Constitution, right?
Thomas Jefferson what?
He didn't write the Constitution.
He did not?
No, he was one of the framers, but he did not write it.
What's that?
He wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Declaration, okay. Fine, but what about the Bill of Rights?
Go ahead. Is
Okay,
there a
well,
question?
anyway, since he was involved in that, no,
Not a
just
question.
a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I had that wrong in that Thomas Jefferson.
That's
However,
all right.
he was involved, and I believe that he clearly understood what that First Amendment meant.
My compliments to this lady. I have heard the Establishment Clause referred to hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times in my life, and this is the only time I have ever had the Free Exercise Clause linked to it. My compliments to you. Thank you all for coming. You're a great audience. Participation was great. I hope you'll come to a future University Club event. And we're dismissed.